The security guard knocked on my car window like I'd committed a crime. Not like I was an intern with a CEO-issued access badge clipped to my lanyard. Not like I had documentation. Like I was a problem that needed removing before it got comfortable. I rolled down the window. He said HR was looking for me, said there was a question about the parking spot. Then HR's actual voice came through his radio. Crisp, certain, the tone of someone who had already made a decision and was just completing the paperwork around it. That spot was assigned in error, the voice said. Her family confirmed she's not in a legitimate placement. Her family. My face burned first. Humiliation before anger. The specific heat of being dismissed in front of strangers while your credentials are literally visible on your person. I looked at the parking sign through my windshield. My name was still taped there. Black marker. Clear handwriting. Graham Hale had written it himself when he assigned me the spot 2 weeks earlier. Someone was trying to erase me in real time. I turned back to the guard. I'm not moving the car, I said, until HR explains that on record. The guard's radio crackled. Then a different voice. Tell her to come upstairs, now, and bring her badge, if it still works. I walked to the building entrance with legs that felt like they belonged to someone steadier than me. My badge failed at the turnstile. The light flashed red. One clean rejection. People in the lobby turned to look the way people turned when something awkward happened to someone else. The specific mixture of sympathy and relief. A coworker I trusted, Devin, from the analytics team, was coming through the adjacent turnstile. He saw my face. Saw the red light. He tapped his own badge and the gate opened immediately. His worked perfectly. Mine felt like a public statement. Devin fell into step beside me and said quietly, "This isn't standard. Someone filed an emergency hold." An emergency hold. Not a system error. Not a delay. A deliberate, specifically requested action. The kind that required someone with internal access and the motivation to use it. HR met us near the elevator. The escort wasn't aggressive, it was the other kind. The kind where someone walks beside you in a way that communicates containment without saying the word. I kept my spine straight. In the HR conference room, a document was slid across the table toward me, a formal complaint. I looked at the bottom of the page. Read the signature line twice. My mother's name was on it. I read the complaint carefully, even though my hands were shaking. 3 specific accusations. That I had misrepresented my role. That I had used family influence to access the position. That I had accessed restricted assets without authorization. My mother didn't know what restricted assets meant. We'd never once discussed that phrase in any form. She didn't know the organizational structure of the company I worked for. She barely knew what the company did. This had not come from her understanding. It had come from someone who understood exactly what words to use to create a specific kind of damage. The HR representative was watching my face as I read, the way HR sometimes watches people when they're deciding whether tears mean guilt or grief. I looked up. "I need to see the original submission metadata," I said. "Who submitted this? From where? And at what time?" "That information isn't available to employees under review," she said. Not available, which wasn't the same as doesn't exist. "Then I'd like a copy of this document and a formal request on file that the metadata be preserved," I said. The HR director leaned forward. "We'll be contacting your aunt for verification," she said. "She's listed as a family reference." My stomach dropped. My Aunt Tanya. I called Tanya from a bench near the building's side entrance. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm in the specific way it was warm when she was managing something. "Honey," she said immediately. "Calm down. I heard you're upset." She heard. Past tense. Before I'd said a word, I asked her directly, "Did you file something with my company's HR?" She laughed. Light. Easy. "Why would I do something like that?" Not I didn't. A question redirected back at me, the specific non-denial that answered nothing and took nothing off the table. She said she would handle it, said I just needed to stop making it worse. Said if I let her take care of things, this would all settle down quickly. Take care of things. Her phrase for every arrangement she made that I wasn't supposed to look at too closely. I held the phone. Then I heard it. Behind her voice, another voice, my mother's. Somewhere in the same room. "Did she see the report?" My mother said. Tanya covered the phone immediately, but not fast enough. I stood up from the bench. walked to my car, and sat in the CEO's parking spot for a long time without moving. I drove to my mother's house. I needed to see her face when I asked her. When I came through the door, I found my cousin Kelsey sitting at the kitchen table, with my laptop open in front of her. Not her laptop. Mine. The one I'd left at my mother's 2 weeks earlier when I'd stayed for a weekend. My stomach dropped in a specific, cold way. Kelsey looked up without embarrassment. "Relax," she said. "I was looking at your internship portfolio, just checking it out." Just. The word people use to make invasions sound like accidents. My mother appeared from the kitchen doorway. "Don't be dramatic," she said. "She's family." I walked across the room and took the laptop, sat down at the same table and changed every password I had while they watched me. Email, cloud storage, work accounts, personal accounts. I did it methodically, without looking up. When I finished, Kelsey's expression had settled into something less casual. "Passwords won't protect you," she said. Not angry, almost bored. "From what?" I asked. Kelsey leaned back. "From what HR already believes," she said. "You can change your passwords. You can't change the report they have on file." I closed the laptop, said nothing, and started building something in my mind. My mother cried, complete crying. The kind that required tissue and several minutes and communicated that the person doing it had been storing something significant for a while. She said I was humiliating her. Said I was acting like I was better than everyone else. Like my success was something I was pointing at them, rather than something I had built through work and time and careful effort. Tanya texted while Mom was still crying. "Stop fighting this. Accept the corrective plan. There's still a way through this that works for everyone. Everyone meaning them." The corrective plan was the path where I went quietly. Signed what they wanted. Let Kelsey step into the space my work had made without claiming any of it. Let the story become one where I had overstepped and been appropriately corrected. I put the phone face down. I looked at my mother. "I'm not going to sacrifice my future to make this easier to look at," I said. Mom looked at me with the expression of someone who had run out of softer tools and had reached for the last one. "Then don't come back here," she said quietly. "When you lose everything, don't come here." I picked up my bag, walked out, drove home with both hands on the wheel and nothing on the radio. HR presented the corrective plan the next morning. It was 4 pages, professional language. The kind of document that had been carefully drafted to sound balanced while delivering something entirely one-sided. I could keep the internship, under specific conditions. First condition. I would sign a statement admitting that I had overstepped my designated intern role. Second condition. I would transfer my project documentation to a more suitable employee who would take primary responsibility for the work going forward. I read those 2 sentences 3 times. My project. The system I had been building for 4 months. The operational tracking model that Graham Hale had called the kind of thinking we needed 6 years ago, in the meeting where he'd assigned me the parking spot as a gesture of recognition. Transfer it to a more suitable employee. I knew exactly who the suitable employee was. My hands were shaking by the time I reached the signature line. I set the document down. "I need time to review this," I said, "and I'd like to have legal counsel look at it before I sign anything." The HR representative nodded, the kind of nod that didn't mean yes. The HR director leaned forward slightly. "If you don't sign," she said, "we begin a full review of your entire employee file. Everything since your first day." I saw Graham Hale the following afternoon. He was crossing the main lobby. The walk of someone who moved through spaces expecting them to rearrange around him. Which they did. I was on the far side near the reception desk, still under HR escort protocol. I wasn't supposed to move through the building independently. Hale saw me. His eyes dropped to my badge lanyard and registered the empty parking spot access tag still clipped to it. The one that matched the sign in the lot with my name on it. He started moving in my direction. HR noticed. The representative stepped between us with the smooth efficiency of someone who had practiced exactly this kind of interruption. I watched it happen from across the lobby. Watched Hale stop. Watched his expression change. He said something to the representative. She responded. He looked past her toward me. "Why is she being escorted?" he said. The words reached me clearly across the lobby's ambient noise. HR answered, smoothly. the voice of someone who had prepared an answer for exactly this question. Compliance matters, she said. She's not cleared to speak with leadership while under review. Hale looked at me for one moment. Then he was redirected. Efficiently. Professionally. And I was escorted back toward the HR corridor. Devon found me in the stairwell that afternoon. He had something on his phone that he needed me to see. He'd been monitoring the internal workflow system as part of his normal analytics role, which gave him visibility into project status changes. My project, the operational tracking model, had been relabeled. The status now read, transferred. In the contributor field, where only my name had appeared for 4 months, a new name had been added. Kelsey, listed as supporting contributor. I stared at the screen. Devon said, "This is fraud, and it's sloppy." Sloppy because the transfer had been logged with a timestamp that preceded any formal internal approval process, meaning whoever made the change hadn't waited for authorization, had simply made it and assumed the speed of the action would outrun anyone's ability to notice. They had been wrong about Devon's attention to detail. "Is there an audit trail?" I asked. "Limited," Devon said, "but something is there." My phone lit up with a calendar notification. I looked at it. Project review, all stakeholders, presenter Kelsey, scheduled for 4 days from now. Devon looked at the notification over my shoulder. 4 days, he said. I nodded. 4 days was enough. My mother called that night. Not crying this time. Calm, the specific calm that meant the conversation had been prepared in advance. She said Tanya could make everything disappear. That was the phrase she used. Make it disappear. Like the complaint and the access hold in the transferred project were smoke that could be waved away by the right person making the right calls. All I had to do was stop being stubborn. Let Kelsey have this one. She framed it as generosity, like I was being offered a gift rather than asked to accept a theft. I listened to the whole sentence. Then I said, "You're choosing them over me." Silence. My mother's silence had different textures depending on what she was feeling. This one was the texture of someone deciding something they didn't want to decide. "No," she said finally. Her voice was quieter than it had been. "I'm choosing what keeps us afloat." She said my name. I didn't respond to it. I understood what she was saying, understood the pressure she was under, understood that Tanya had been positioned in her life as a source of stability in ways I was only beginning to understand the full architecture of. But understanding was not the same as accepting. I said goodnight and started building my documentation folder. I spent 3 days recording everything, every email with a timestamp, every meeting note where my work had been praised and attributed to me specifically, every system access log I could request through formal channels. The pattern I found in HR's language was specific. They never said anything directly. Every communication was phrased in a way that communicated clearly to a person reading between the lines while providing no actual fingerprints. HR had been trained to leave no evidence of intent, only outcomes. But I kept going deeper. I filed a formal request for records of the original complaint submission. Date, time, device used. 3 days later, the response came back. The complaint had been submitted from an HR workstation, not from a personal device. Not from an external email address, not from anything that could be attributed to a random family member who had access to the right form. An HR workstation. I pulled the workstation ID, cross-referenced it against the internal directory Devon had helped me locate. The workstation was assigned to a specific user. I sat with the information for a moment. The workstation belonged to Tanya, my aunt, who worked in HR, who I had not known until this moment worked in HR. I found the conference room by accident. I was returning from a documented meeting, the kind I was allowed to attend under restricted access, and the door to a small presentation room was half open. Kelsey was inside, alone, standing in front of a projected slide deck. My slide deck. My language. My structure. The specific way I organized the operational data that Graham Hale had called distinctive. She was reading from the notes I'd written in the presenter panel. Rehearsing. She looked up when she sensed someone in the doorway. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Kelsey did the thing she always did when she was caught somewhere she shouldn't be. She reframed it as a favor. "I'm saving you," she said. "You're too emotional to get through a presentation right now. They've already decided you're unstable." I looked at her. You can't present what you can't answer, I said. Kelsey's expression shifted. Not embarrassed, calculating. Try me, she said. HR already picked a side. It doesn't matter what you say in a room. It matters who they believe when you leave it. She turned back to the slides. I walked away and went directly to Devon. Devon spent 2 evenings helping me access an audit trail. Limited access, the kind of partial record that existed in any system if you knew where to look and had someone technical enough to navigate the request process without triggering additional flags. What we found was an email chain. Internal, dated 6 weeks before the complaint was filed. The chain included Tanya and 2 other HR addresses I didn't recognize. Tanya's message was 3 sentences. We need to correct the intern situation before leadership gets more attached. The placement was informal and the project scope has grown outside appropriate parameters. I'm handling the documentation. Attached. She'd used the word attached. Like my connection to Graham Hale's attention was a complication to be surgically removed. Like my competence was the problem rather than someone else's access to it. Devon read it over my shoulder, said nothing for a moment. I forwarded the chain to a personal secure email account. Off-site, not connected to anything work-related. Then I opened my company account to save the final version of a project file. The screen went blank. Then an error message. Access denied. Account temporarily suspended pending review. My work account had locked. Mid-save. Mid-process. HR informed me the following morning that I was restricted from my desk. I could access the building only through escorted entry. I could not move through the workspace independently. I could not access my workstation, my files, or the systems I'd been using for 4 months to build the project that was currently scheduled for presentation by someone else. The stated reason was that I was under active review and that access restrictions were a standard protective measure. I stood in the HR corridor and felt the specific suffocation of having resources deliberately cut off. Not because I'd done anything wrong, because I had enough to be dangerous and they wanted me tired and disoriented before the review date. I looked at my own reflection in the elevator doors. Too pale. Too tired. The face of someone who had been running on adrenaline for a week. I said to the HR representative, I need a written explanation of every restriction currently applied to my access, and I want the policy language cited for each one. She wrote it down. Then she replied, policy allows supervisory discretion when the employee is under suspicion. Then I need the suspicion documented formally, I said. She wrote that down too. Every piece of paper they generated was evidence. I had learned that from their own playbook. They came to my apartment. Tanya and my mother, standing on my doorstep at 7 in the evening without calling ahead. The specific boldness of people who believed their presence was inherently welcome. My mother's face was set, resolved. The face she wore when she had decided the situation required a difficult thing and she was going to do the difficult thing. Tanya stood slightly behind her, arms crossed, the posture of someone who was letting someone else go first but was fully present as backup. You can end this tonight, my mother said. Sign the statement, let this settle. I looked at both of them. Tanya added, or we make sure you're blacklisted in this industry, across all of it. Her voice was matter-of-fact, not angry, the tone of someone stating available options. I stood in my doorway. You just threatened me, I said. In front of a witness I'm going to name and with a phone currently recording in my pocket. I want that on record. Tanya's face changed. The composure shifted. Record whatever you want, she said. No one is going to believe a 23-year-old intern over HR leadership. I looked at her. We'll see, I said, and closed the door. Amara found me in the cafeteria. I'd been eating at the same corner table for a week, alone. Under the specific social quarantine of someone under active HR review. People who knew me nodded. Nobody sat down. Amara was the head of operations. I'd seen her in 2 company-wide meetings, never spoken to her directly. She sat across from me without preamble. I was looking at the project review schedule, she said. Her voice was neutral. Her eyes were not. Your name isn't on it, for a project that's been attributed to your work in 4 separate leadership briefings. I looked at her. I'd like to answer your question, I said carefully, but HR has restricted me from speaking with leadership while I'm under review. Amara looked at me for a moment. Then she said, Then HR can speak with me. Today. She stood up. Walked toward the elevators. I watched her go. For the first time in 8 days, someone with the authority to ask questions had asked one. Not someone who needed me to explain or convince. Someone who had seen the missing piece herself and had decided she wanted to understand why it was missing. I exhaled slowly and waited. Through the glass wall of the conference room, I watched Amara meet with the HR team. Tanya was in there. I could see her from the hallway. She was talking with the fast, polished energy of someone presenting a prepared position. Her hands were moving. Her smile was on. Amara's expression was neutral. The specific neutral of someone listening without indicating which direction their conclusion was traveling. Then something shifted. Tanya said something. A detail about the project timeline, a specific technical reference. I saw Amara's expression change, not dramatically. Just the small, particular tightening that happened when a discrepancy registered. Tanya had mentioned something she shouldn't have known. A detail that wasn't in any public documentation. A detail that existed only in the development notes inside the project folder, which she couldn't have accessed unless she'd been inside the files. Which she should not have been in. Amara's smile, which had been neutral until that moment, went somewhere colder. She said something. Short. Then she stood up, walked out of the conference room, looked at me in the hallway. "Do you have copies of your original work?" she asked. "Not on company systems." I thought of the secure folder, the off-site account, Devon's screenshots, the audit trail. "Yes," I said. Amara and I met the next morning in a private room she'd reserved off the main corridor. I brought everything, printed copies of the work files with metadata intact, version history going back 4 months, notes from manager check-ins where my work had been reviewed and praised by name, Devon's screenshot of the workflow change, the email chain I'd forwarded to my secure account, the workstation ID report showing the complaint's origin. Amara read through each section. Completely, without minimizing anything, without offering alternate explanations, without the specific performance of someone who was looking for a way to not see what was in front of them. When she finished, she set the last page down. "This looks like internal manipulation," she said. The word manipulation. Said directly, by someone who had the authority to say it in a room where it would matter. I almost collapsed from the specific relief of being believed by someone whose belief had consequence. Almost. Amara looked at me. "But if the CEO has an interest in this project, and this goes where I think it might go, it becomes complicated." She paused. "Dangerous, even." "Dangerous for who?" I asked. Amara looked at me for a moment. "For everyone who assumed you wouldn't have allies," she said. Project review day arrived. I was not on the presenter schedule. I was allowed to attend only because Amara had specifically requested my presence. I sat at the back of the room with my folder on the table and my hands folded over it. Kelsey walked in dressed for the role. Confident. The specific confidence that lived on the surface of someone who had never had to build anything and therefore didn't know what building felt like from the inside. She began the presentation. My language, my structure, my framework. She delivered it fluently for the first 12 minutes. The prepared sections, the overview slides, the parts anyone could have memorized with enough rehearsal. Then questions started. The third question was from Amara. She asked about the decision logic behind a specific data model. The choice of particular parameters over alternatives that would have appeared simpler. The reasoning embedded in the architecture at a level that required not just familiarity, but authorship. Kelsey answered. The answer was pretty. It was confident. It was completely empty of the actual reasoning, because she didn't know the reasoning, because she had never made the decision, because she had memorized the output without understanding the thinking that produced it. Kelsey looked toward the back of the room, at me. "She coached me," Kelsey said, loud enough for everyone. "She's been involved in this the whole time. She's the problem here." Graham Hale entered the room. Nobody had announced him. The door simply opened, and he was there. The room went quiet, in the way rooms went quiet for him. Complete and immediate. He looked at Kelsey, at Amara, at the projected slide. Then he looked at me. His eyes moved to the empty parking tag on my lanyard, then to my face. "I gave you that spot for a reason," he said. His voice was even. But the sentence carried something. The weight of a person who had made a deliberate decision and was now understanding that someone had tried to unmake it without his knowledge. I felt tears forming for the first time in 10 days. Not from fear, not from exhaustion, from being seen by someone who had enough power that being seen by them meant something. Hale looked at HR. "I want a full audit of the complaint on file," he said, "and a full record of the project transfer authorization. Both on my desk." HR started to respond. Tanya was in the back of the room. She said, "Graham, this is a family matter." The sentence landed in the room's silence. Hale turned toward the voice. Amara's expression sharpened. "A family matter," said out loud, in a room full of witnesses. Tanya realized the moment she'd said it. The phrase hung in the air. Family matter, in a corporate investigation meeting, about a formal HR complaint, about internal access and project transfers and unauthorized system entries. Family matter. Amara's eyes narrowed in the specific way of someone who had just had their theory confirmed by the person they were investigating. Hale's expression went hard. Not angry in a visible way, just resolute. The expression of someone who had made a decision and was now in the process of implementing it. He looked at HR. "Tanya," he said, "you're excused from this meeting pending investigation. Do not access company systems until HR oversight reviews your clearance." Tanya stood. She gathered her things with the controlled movements of someone managing a reaction they didn't want visible. As she passed my chair, she leaned close enough that only I could hear. "I'll take your mother down with me if you push this," she said. Then she walked out. My phone lit up on the table, a text from my mother. "How could you embarrass us like this?" I put the phone face down and sat still in my chair, waiting for what came next. My mother called that night, not from a calm place. From the place she went when the managed version of herself had run out of room to operate, and the raw version was what remained. She screamed. About how I had ruined everything. About how Tanya had been helping. About how I should have stayed quiet and grateful and understood that some opportunities required staying small to hold. She said Tanya's help had come with conditions, with financial arrangements, with specific expectations of my behavior that I had now violated by failing to disappear when told to. I let her finish. Then I said, "You sold me." 2 words, the specific 2 words that described what had happened in the most accurate available language. My mother went quiet. Then, very small, very quiet, the sentence came. "Tanya said she'd get us security," she said. "The house, the bills, I just had to let her handle your placement." My throat tightened. "And the complaint?" I asked. My mother didn't answer that directly, which was itself an answer. "Then, if Tanya falls," she whispered, "we lose the house." I sat on my kitchen floor and held the phone until the call ended. Then I sat in the silence for a long time and understood what I was going to do tomorrow. The formal investigation meeting was in a conference room on the executive floor. 8 people around the table, an outside investigator, Amara, 2 members of executive HR who were not in Tanya's chain of command, legal counsel, Graham Hale at the far end. Tanya arrived with her own HR representative. She presented her version, methodically. Me as unstable, ambitious in a reckless way, prone to misunderstanding professional boundaries. Kelsey appeared briefly. She cried, clean, visible tears, the kind that communicated vulnerability and arrived exactly when useful. My mother sat near the door, not testifying, just present, looking like someone watching a house they'd built slowly develop a crack they couldn't repair. Then Amara opened her folder. The audit trail went up on the screen, the workstation ID with Tanya's credentials, the timestamp showing the complaint filed during business hours from an HR terminal. The email chain, forwarded from my secure account, with Tanya's instructions to correct the intern situation. The workflow screenshots showing the project transfer with authorization codes that traced back to accounts in Tanya's oversight chain. Tanya's face drained of color. Slowly, from the top down. The investigator said, "The evidence indicates retaliation and misappropriation of intellectual work product." The room was completely silent. Then Hale looked directly at me. "Do you want to pursue this fully?" he asked. The question sat in the room. Fully. I understood what it meant. Fully meant the investigation went to its conclusion without accommodation. Without the softened version where people resigned quietly and the record stayed sealed and everyone agreed to let the story end before its actual ending. Fully meant consequences that couldn't be managed. Fully meant my mother lost whatever Tanya had been providing. Fully meant the house she'd mentioned, the bills, the arrangement she'd traded my career for. I looked at my mother near the door. She was looking at me with an expression I had never seen on her before. Not angry, not pleading, just watching. The way you watched something you understood you had caused and couldn't uncause. I heard Tanya's voice in my memory, clear and certain. No one will believe a 23-year-old intern. I heard Kelsey's voice. Passwords won't protect you. I heard the guard at my car window, and I understood something clearly. My dignity was not a negotiating position. It was not something I could temporarily set aside until conditions improved. It was the point. It had always been the point. I looked at Hale. Yes, I said. My voice was steady all the way through. I want the record to be true. Hale nodded. Then he turned to his counsel and said, remove HR oversight from Tanya's chain. Reassign the project to its original author under a new division structure. The weeks that followed moved in a direction I had stopped being able to imagine when I was sitting in my car in the parking spot with the security guard's knock still ringing in the window glass. Tanya was terminated. Misconduct, the specific category that attached to what the investigation confirmed. Her access to company systems was revoked the same afternoon. Kelsey's credentials were reviewed. Quietly, thoroughly. The kind of review that found what it found and then acted on it without ceremony. The project, mine, documented, attributed properly, was placed in a new operational division. Hale called me into his office 2 weeks after the investigation closed. Not a performance, not a gesture, an offer. He wanted me to lead the productized version of the system I had built. A real role, a permanent one, with equity participation in the product's growth. Ownership, not borrowed. Not assigned informally. Not a parking spot with my name and marker that someone could erase before I arrived. Something with my name on documents that couldn't be taped over. I accepted. That evening I drove to the lot and stood beside the parking sign. The name still on it. Still in Hale's handwriting. My mother and I didn't speak for a while after the investigation. The distance was honest rather than punitive. I changed my number. Set boundaries. Stopped funding people's access to me as a currency for arrangements I hadn't agreed to. They called me a mistake. So I became the correction.